Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Eden Maybon of lightcycleastrology.com. Today we are taking a look at the astrology for this next week ahead between January the 15th and the 21st. And we will be looking at the major aspects that come through, the timing of those aspects, and of course we'll dive into some of the archetypal themes that are in play based on the aspects in the astrology. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit notifications so you don't miss any videos. Leave some comments in the comment section, and you can always visit lightcycleastrology.com if you want to find out about the readings that I offer. You can scroll down to the bottom of the page and it will give you a description of the way that I work with clients and the pricing and all of that. I am an astrologer that practices traditional or Hellenistic astrology, but of course I use some modern techniques and planets and things like that as well. So you can visit lightcycleastrology.com if you want to find out about a reading. Okay, let's get into the real-time clock now and take a look at the astrology that is beginning the week for us. We have a couple of trines that begin to form on Tuesday this week. We have one trine that is forming between Mercury and Jupiter. And we also have another trine that forms between Venus and Neptune. But these are not the leading or star kind of standout aspects of the week. The standout aspect of the week is definitely the conjunction that forms between the Sun and Pluto. That conjunction moves into that 3-degree range of engagement right around Wednesday, and then will make a cazimi on Saturday, and then on Sunday both planets enter Aquarius. So we'll get into all of this timing here and the meaning behind what I think that this is representing or corresponding to. But that is sort of the progression of aspects that comes through. So Tuesday, now we get the beginning of these trines forming. The trine between Mercury and Jupiter is very fascinating this week, even though it's not really the leading or the starring aspect of the week that is really going to stand out above the other powerful and potent energies that is coming with the Sun conjoining Pluto and entering a new sign. It still is, for me, it's really interesting because we have already visited this exact aspect with the same two planets in the same two signs. Last December, as Mercury was stationing to turn retrograde, Mercury was stopping in the sky in trine to Jupiter. So this really is corresponding to perhaps what was happening last December. And I find that really fascinating as a tie-in for some of the themes that are also coming this week. And then we have the Venus trine Neptune. So both of these trines begin to form on Tuesday. Both of these trines perfect by Friday or become exact by Friday. And then on Wednesday here, if we go forward one day on the real-time clock, we see that the Sun and Pluto are very, very close in the sky at that, Pluto's at that very last degree and almost last minutes of the sign of Capricorn. And now the Sun comes in and marries Pluto. Now, in the ancient world, ancient astrologers used a language that is a little bit different from what we say today in astrology. Today, we would call this a conjunction. But I have heard that in ancient times, any aspect between two planets could be called a conjunction. And conjunctions were referred to by ancient astrologers as adherences. And I think that that is always interesting to talk about when you have conjunctions in the sky. And one of the reasons for that is because, they called angles between two planets that were in different signs, they called those aspects. And that gives you the impression that it's like, okay, there are two gods that are beholding one another, right? There's one god in one position, and then there's a god in somewhere else in the chart or in the sky in another position. And when they come into that alignment, they aspect or see one another or witness one another. And I think that that is useful to remember. That's sort of what is corresponding to things that are manifesting or corresponding to things that are happening down here. But a conjunction is quite different. It's when two planets come together by bodily union. And that word adherence makes me think of almost like nuclear fusion in a star where things are welded or fused together. And then, of course, it's quite easy to think about conjunctions as like we would for a new moon, for instance, when the sun and the moon come together, as maybe that time where a seed is being fertilized. Some people think that a conjunction or a new moon is sort of that metaphor of like maybe the seed sprouting. But if we want to get technical, I prefer to think of the seed as becoming almost fertilized. And that's because it reminds me of when a woman conceives, right? And there is the sexual act that happens, and then you don't always know that you've become pregnant right away, right? Well, of course you don't. It takes a couple of weeks. You have to, be late on your cycle, and then, of course, in time the belly grows, and then it's manifest. You can see that, oh, there is something growing. There's something will be born at some point. Conjunctions or adherences, in my mind, are like that. They are planets getting together in the sky that are fertilizing something, and it's not so apparent right off the bat what that thing may be. Now, of course, when Pluto is in the mix, there may be a lot of intense emotions or powerful things that are happening around us that we definitely notice the emotions. So maybe in this metaphor of a seed becoming fertilized, and the first step in that metaphor as being the sexual act, this could be those powerful sexual feelings that are happening that lead to an eventual birth. But however you prefer to think about conjunctions or adherences, there is definitely something that is coming with some pretty potent, powerful emotions or circumstances around us that are having to do with solar things, right? Which is always leading to a potential of gaining awareness of something. So Pluto and the sun, generally we could think about that as, or is there something below the surface or hidden that comes into the light, and we are made aware of some circumstance or some powerful, deep emotions or feelings or something like that. But now, as both of these planets are getting ready to move across a boundary, a sign boundary here into a new sign, a god of transition himself, when we think about Pluto, transformation, transition, all of that type of archetypal theme, themes that go along with that. It's interesting that a god of transformation is himself transforming into a different sign at the time that something is becoming, moving into awareness or becoming visible somehow. So I think that is really powerful. And one of the things that you see is, okay, as we go forward past Wednesday, we see these two planets moving very close together within that 3 degrees that we typically use for aspects or engagements. And then by Friday, we get the perfection of these trines. And Saturday, we are going to see that the sun and Pluto go through that cazimi, that exact perfection, conjunction or adherence. And then, boom, Sunday, before week's end, both the sun and Pluto enter the sign of Aquarius. Very fascinating, because if we roll forward, even though technically I should stop, as Rick Levine says, I can't talk about, the week after the week that we're talking about. He'll always say something like that, which is kind of funny, right? But if we just take the real-time clock ahead and move it to the following week on Thursday, January the 25th, we see that here comes the full moon coming through in the sign of the very beginning degrees of the sign of Leo, and making that exact opposition to these two planets that have now moved into Aquarius. That's really potent and powerful. That's a powerful full moon. And then you also have an interesting dynamic because the sun is the host of the full moon, and the sun is himself in a sign opposing his natural temple of Leo, which makes him sort of like the antithetical Leo or authoritarian rebel, if you will. So some of this energy is meant to, I think, provide the catalyzing circumstance, emotion, feeling, moments that is bringing awareness, bringing something to awareness, and also leading to the culmination of the full moon, which somehow is meant to reconcile or deal with that moment. So we get the setup this week, in other words, for the full moon, I believe. Now, let's get into the themes that go along with this. This is going to be the archetypal themes in play this week. So that Mercury trine Jupiter, when you have Mercury making a trine to Jupiter and then Mercury stations retrograde, and then there's this whole process of the Mercury retrograde, and then Mercury goes through the Cazimi conjunction with the sun, becomes reborn. There's a recovery. Mercury changes from an evening star into a morning star, moves from invisibility during the retrograde to visibility after the retrograde, turns direct, and then moves back to that exact place. That is all pointing to something like this theme that is like a story, right? The story begins with maybe it's advantageous to pause, to consider, to think, to scrutinize, to maybe it was even that you got, like, I know people that are heavily mercurial, like Virgo. I know a couple of Virgos and Geminis. You may have noticed that right at the moment that Mercury was turning retrograde, or maybe at the moment where Mercury went through the Cazimi, you may have noticed that people even got colds or became sick or were out of work. And that's a common thing, that when you have Mercury retrogrades, that you'll see people that have heavy Mercury signatures in their natal birth chart will be getting sick or falling ill, and that corresponds to the Mercury retrograde moment. But all of that serves to delay, to take pause, to consider, to go through a process, like a revisioning process. And then, of course, Mercury doing that and turning retrograde right at the moment is kind of like saying, hey, the most advantageous thing or supportive thing for you right now could be to like not just keep going ahead forward, but to like take pause right now. I think that's really interesting. But then, of course, as that process goes through the process, as things get worked out, as the bugs get examined and we work the kinks out, we clear things up, we have different ideas or communication coming through. It's like the process is meant to clear things out, work out the bugs, work out the glitches, and now comes back to the moment where we are once again revisiting this exact trine to Jupiter. So all this is, for me, is pointing to something like the bugs have been worked out, things are cleared up. Now it's advantageous to resume or to pick up where you left off, or to move ahead in a new way that is going to benefit from perhaps communication. So Mercury trine Jupiter, communication that adds to the growth that you're working on. Asking questions. Mercury is a god that is always curious. Maybe now it's like is a really good time to think of the questions and pose the questions to people that are around you. If you're curious about something, maybe that communication is supportive, right? It is being supported by those around you, or is beneficial to the growth that you are working on somehow or another. But it has that quality of like curiosity is supported, or communication is supported, or something like that. Now, I don't want to give people advice about, the squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of thing, and then you speak up and it doesn't have a good outcome for you because maybe you went too far or overdid it, or because You listen to some guy on YouTube and he said to, finally ask your boss for a raise. But for me, the omen speaks to, this is a good time to ask your boss for a raise, but don't ask your boss for a raise because I said so. Fill it out, read the room, and move forward, make your own decisions on that. But I think that this trine is speaking to advantageous or supportive things coming through the forms of putting yourself out there communicatively, or asking the questions, or letting people know what you're thinking. And also we have like learning from mentors or teachers is also probably a beneficial thing right now. So sometimes it's not speaking, sometimes it might be listening and learning. That might be the more important side of communication here. So it's not always saying what we think, and maybe, risking putting our foot in our mouths if we're doing so from a position of not understanding the whole dynamic and maybe being arrogant or something like that. That can happen with when Jupiter is involved with Mercury as well. So you don't necessarily want to just recklessly say stuff or promise something too big or something like that. But communication is important, and part of communication is also listening. And Mercury was also a god of learning and listening to things. So listening to mentors or learning from mentors or teachers right now could be advantageous for the way ahead. So that is part of the theme of the week. And then, of course, we also have the Venus trine Neptune aspect that is providing some context to the week. I'm going to keep this one simple and say that there may be a theme around everyone deserves to see your best side. I'm getting that because Neptune for me can often correlate to all of the people around me. It reminds me of, like, if you've ever snorkeled in the ocean, and you've seen the schools of fish swimming around, and how, in a sense, like, even though we don't live in the ocean, we certainly are among a lot of fellow human beings all the time, whether that's getting gas at the gas station, whether that's going to work and seeing the coworkers you see every day, talking to your boss and your kids. And it's like sometimes Neptune for me represents the collective human fishies that are just swimming around in your environment. It's just, it's the environmental, social dynamic of all of the people that you deal with, big and small, quick interactions to long interactions. It's all of the interactions that you could have with the people around you. And that for me sometimes has to do with Neptune. And Venus likes to be attractive and present itself, put its best foot forward, or, show up dressed in the right way, being amenable or something like that. That's an interesting theme that comes along with this sun adhering to Pluto. So on the one hand, you get the sense that the week is kind of like, okay, it might be advantageous to learn what people are saying to you, or to maybe communicate what you're thinking to others. You might be showing up and being concerned with, are you being pleasant socially to those around you? Are you giving them like your best side, or smiling, remembering to smile, or dressing for the occasion correctly, or all of those Venusian kind of aesthetics come into play. And it's important to present those to not just, somebody that's really important in your life, like a spouse or a boss or coworkers, but also to, again, like you're filling up at the gas station and you maybe go in for a snack, and it's like, even that person deserves your charm, so to speak. That's all in play. But then there's this very rascally sun adherence to Pluto that is beginning to grow in potency as the week goes on. Begins probably around Wednesday to be noticeable, and then just gets really, really more and more rascally as the week goes on, I would say. So that's an interesting dynamic to sort of be feeling that social, you know, pleasantness, along with like being maybe more receptive to hearing what people are saying, while also maybe, you know, giving compliments. Or there's this real social dynamic that is sort of pleasant and beneficial, and it's smooth and stuff like that. And then here comes Billy Idol and the White Wedding, and it's like you're going to get married to the rebel and throw the marriage into the face of your parents who don't approve of the person you're marrying. That conjunction or adherence, where something is being welded together or fertilized, I can't help but to see this. And maybe some of you don't know White Wedding if you're not as old as I am. Probably most of you do, but if you want to check out the if you want to put music to the imagery that is coming in my head with the themes of this Sun conjunct Pluto, you could listen to the song by Billy Idol, The White Wedding. It just has that really rebellious, I'm going to throw this in the face of other people because upheaval and rebellion are becoming married somehow around me or inside of me. Something is welling up. Something needs to come to the light. I'm becoming aware of ways that I am constricted, or something along those lines. And that builds as the week goes on. Another way that you might phrase an archetypal message that is corresponding with this adherence, I think, is you could say something like, my own authority among kings and collectives, right? This is a very nuanced thing. And let me just pull up the real-time clock one more time, and I'll show you why. I'm going to take out every planet except for the Sun and Pluto, just to make it really, really, really easy to see. So Sun and Pluto in Aquarius. Well, both of these planets are standing in opposition to the Sun's temple of Leo, or the Sun sign of Leo, right? This is really, really interesting because the Sun represents authority, right? But the Sun calls Leo home because it's that archetypal central authority that can represent kings or bosses or authority figures or governments or a parent. So there is kind of this leonine one person that is holding the center of authority for those around them in some way. But when the Sun moves into Aquarius and is in the sign opposite to that natural place in the zodiac, the Sun becomes the rebel or the leader that speaks up on behalf of the collective that might go against the one central authority figure, the boss, the parent, the government, the IRS, anybody that holds that sort of higher authority that is more singular, or, you know, not the collective, but the authority that sort of governs over the collective or watches over the collective. The Sun in Aquarius can really speak to a leader, like a rebellious leader like Bob Marley, or you know, anybody that is sort of like a leader for the power that the collective also needs to have. It's speaking on behalf of the collective and saying, I'm going to lead the rabble or the collective against maybe a governing authority that may be tyrannical in the on the shadow side of things. Like, so if there is a theme of dealing with power that is being abusive or restrictive, or feels as though it's somehow against what is, you know, good for you, there's a real propensity here, I think, to sort of almost become like the leader of a rabble and sort of rebel against that condition or that person that is maybe telling you what to do in a way that doesn't seem like it's fair or something like that. With Pluto in the mix here, it's as if there is an awareness of something deep that is welling up. There's transition or upheaval that is necessary. So you really do get that kind of sense as the week goes on that is really, really interesting. Marriage between spirit and soul is also something that you might archetypally phrase for this for these two planets coming together in this particular way. And the reason that I have basically titled it this way is because spirit is a word that corresponds to the sun, and soul is a word that can correspond to Pluto. It's not the only word, and the soul isn't only corresponded to Pluto, but I think that Pluto and the soul share some correspondence. Now, this is something that leads us into a distinction between spirit and soul. That is something I've been learning about from my own teacher that has really been fascinating to me. And I think that that comes into play here. And probably one of the mystical things that's happening in my own life, but, seen from the astrology, is that as this astrology is appearing right now in the skies, so too am I sort of learning about these things philosophically from a teacher all at the same time. I think that's really interesting. But the realization around being imperfectly perfect right now may be a theme that comes through. And that's because the sun attempts to ascend above the material world. The sun tries to lead itself out of the confines or the constraints or the laws of material nature, and it intends to unify with God. It is the notion or the concept that everything is one on the highest, or in the where the highest divine order is getting close to Godhead or something like that. Of course, we all think, on some higher level, everything is one, right? That's the notion of spirit. And spirit can try to discount or leave or escape from the state of individuality and materiality. It can sort of say, I don't want to be an individual. I want to merge with God and sort of leave all of this worldly things behind. That is also happening in tandem with Pluto, which I believe is a god that represents the soul on some level, that says it's okay and it's beautiful to be down here in the material world, because if you only lived in the spiritual, in spiritual union with Godhood, you wouldn't get a lot of experience. If you're one and the same with everything, you don't get a lot of visceral experience. And so what would be the point of being down here in the first place, inhabiting a body, having a soul, if it wasn't to be okay with all of it? Be okay with the suffering, be okay with the pleasure, the pain, everything that comes along with being down here in this realm. The soul is okay with, and the soul finds beauty in that. And in fact, that's the whole point. The whole point is to experience and experience as a member of the collective, but as an individual in the collective, versus being totally unified and one and the same as God or something like that. So very interesting that both of these archetypal gods are coming together and representing a marriage or a fertilization of something that has to do with both being okay with who you are as you are right now. You're in all of the ways that you're imperfect. It's perfectly fine. And in fact, that's the point in being that way right now. There's no need to escape. Now, that may be the way that you transcend or understand or become aware of something that feels as though things want you to not believe that, or there are pressures around us to change and be something we're not, or any number of things like that could be part of the tension that is leading up to this full moon. But those are the themes as I see them. And I would love to hear what you guys think about some of these ideas, especially as all of these themes are happening in this very collective sign of Aquarius toward the end of the week. So only time will tell exactly, how we all experience this. But I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you guys liked this and found something good out of this. I'll be back again next Monday with another Mantic Monday video, and we'll be taking a look at the full moon as it comes through then, which will be a continuation more or less of some of the astrology this week. Until then, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.